The name card on my seat read, "The inconvenient one is here." And that was the moment my entire world shifted on its axis. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The laughter in the opulent ballroom was brought to a dead halt by the secret I was about to reveal. It all began when the invitation showed up on a Tuesday, tucked unassumingly between a utility bill and a handful of junk mail. I honestly came close to tossing it in the recycling bin without a second thought. A cream-colored envelope, heavy and embossed with a gold seal, was not the kind of correspondence typically sent to Arthur Harrington, the proprietor of a humble flower shop in a less fashionable corner of the city. My hands, usually steady from years of arranging delicate stems, trembled slightly as I slid my finger under the seal. It was an invitation to the annual Riverside Gentlemen's Luncheon, the most exclusive and talked-about social gathering in our city, held at the downtown Fairmont Hotel. The guest list was a who's who of our community. Only the city's elite were ever invited. Surgeons, high-powered attorneys, corporate executives, and men from families whose money was generations old. It certainly wasn't a place for men like me, who started their days before dawn and usually had a permanent layer of soil beneath their fingernails. The invitation had been sent by Victor, my sister Rebecca's husband of 2 decades. To say we had never been close would be an understatement. Describing our relationship as distant would be an act of extreme generosity. From the moment he married into the family, he had consistently made it abundantly clear that I was not the kind of brother-in-law he had ever envisioned for himself. My simple work clothes and my noticeable lack of influential social connections seemed to be a personal affront to him. "Perhaps it's time we finally brought you into the fold, Arthur," he had said in a phone call later that same day, his voice smooth and practiced. "You've been on your own for so long. After all, the gentleman would be so interested to finally meet Rebecca's brother." There was an undercurrent in his tone that should have served as a red flag, a warning bell I chose to ignore. But at 55 years old, after decades of being politely omitted from family events that were deemed too sophisticated for my presence, a part of me desperately wanted to believe that this was a genuine olive branch, a sign of final acceptance. I ended up spending money I really couldn't spare on a new suit. It was nothing ostentatious, just a classic modest charcoal gray that I thought complemented my graying temples. I even splurged on a proper haircut at a downtown barber shop, a luxury I afforded myself maybe once a year. "You clean up nice, boss," my young employee Jesse commented as I prepared to leave the shop early that Thursday afternoon. "But are you certain about this? Those guys, well, they're not exactly our crowd." I waved away his genuine concern with a forced smile. "They're just people, Jesse. And besides, it's high time I made an effort to get to know my brother-in-law's circle of friends." The grand ballroom of the Fairmont had been utterly transformed. It was a sea of crisp white linens, gleaming crystal glassware, and breathtaking arrangements of orchids and white roses that made my professional eye both deeply envious and quietly critical. About 20 or so men, all dressed in expensive designer suits, were clustered in small, self-important groups, holding champagne flutes and speaking in low, confident tones. Victor saw me from across the room and gave a lazy wave, a wide smile fixed on his face that somehow failed to reach his eyes. "Arthur, you actually made it. How quaint you look." He guided me toward a table where 4 other men were already seated. The value of their watches and cufflinks alone was likely more than my entire business was worth. "Gentlemen," Victor announced with a flourish, "this is Rebecca's brother, the one I've been telling you about." The way they all turned to look at me, a strange cocktail of detached curiosity and something uncomfortably close to pity, made a tight knot form in the pit of my stomach. I took my seat in the only empty chair and froze solid when my eyes fell upon it. Resting against the water goblet was a delicate name card, written in an elegant, looping calligraphy, but it didn't display my name. Instead, the card read, "The Inconvenient One is here." I slowly lifted my gaze to find Victor watching me, a small, triumphant smirk playing on his lips. The men seated around me began to titter, their laughter barely concealed behind their hands. "Oh, Arthur," Victor said, his voice practically dripping with a thick, false concern. "Don't look so utterly shocked. We all have our designated place in the world, don't we? I just thought it would be rather amusing for the gentleman to finally meet the black sheep Rebecca has tried so diligently to keep hidden away all these years." The chuckles around the table grew louder, more open. My face burned with a hot, creeping shame as I remembered every single family holiday I wasn't invited to. Every birthday where the gifts I sent from my nephew were conveniently forgotten in a back closet. Every single time Rebecca had told me, "It's just easier this way if you don't come, Artie." I had been invited here purely for their entertainment. I was the punchline to a joke I hadn't even known was being told. I gripped the thick linen of the tablecloth, my knuckles white, steadying myself. "Well," I said, my voice coming out surprisingly calm and even, which shocked even me. "If I'm going to be the afternoon's main attraction, I suppose I should make it a performance worth remembering." I looked straight into Victor's eyes, watching his confident smirk begin to waver and dissolve into uncertainty. "Would you like me to tell them about the text messages, Victor? The ones I saw between you and Elias Calloway's wife?" The entire ballroom seemed to fall deathly quiet. Every bit of color drained from Victor's face. Across the room, I could see Elias, the distinguished host of the luncheon, stiffen in his chair at table 1. "What did you just say?" Victor's voice had shed its mocking tone, replaced now by a tight, strained whisper. This hadn't been part of any plan. I had held on to Victor's secret for months, constantly telling myself it was none of my business, that exposing it would only make me appear petty and vindictive. But sitting there, deliberately humiliated, in a room full of strangers who judged me on sight, something deep inside me finally snapped. "The text messages," I repeated, my voice now as steady as a rock. "The ones between you and Jessica, Elias's wife." The man sitting to my right let out an audible gasp. Another one nervously fumbled for his water glass. "I think you're confused," Victor managed to say, but his hand trembled so violently that his teacup rattled against its saucer when he set it down. "There's no confusion at all. 3 months ago, you left your phone at my shop after you came in to order flowers for Rebecca's birthday. A text alert came through while I was looking for your contact information to let you know you'd forgotten it. It was from a Jessica, and it was quite explicit." From his table, Elias Calloway stood up, his elegant posture suddenly rigid as a board. I didn't read the rest of the conversation. I continued, my eyes locked on Victor. "But I saw enough. I kept your secret, Victor. I kept it even as I've watched you slap Elias on the back and pretend to be his trusted friend. I kept it even though you've treated me like I was dirt on your shoe for 20 years. I rose from my chair, smoothing down the front of my new suit that now felt so utterly pointless. "I'm not the inconvenient one here, Victor. You are." As I turned and walked toward the exit, chaos erupted behind me. I heard Elias's voice, sharp and filled with a cold fury. I heard Victor's desperate, high-pitched denials, and the shocked, excited murmurs of men who lived for this kind of high society scandal, but never in their wildest dreams expected to find themselves at its epicenter. Out in the sprawling parking lot, I finally let my hands shake. I had really done it. I hadn't just burned a bridge, I dynamited it. Rebecca would never, ever forgive me for this. The already fragile connection to my only remaining family was now likely severed for good. I drove home in a complete daze, heading back to my small house with its rambling garden, which, aside from the flower shop, was my only real source of joy. Once I was safely inside, I kicked off my sensible dress shoes and sank heavily onto the couch, still wearing the suit as the afternoon's dramatic events replayed in my mind on a relentless loop. The phone rang sharply at 7:30 p.m. It was Rebecca. I let the call go to voicemail, then listened as my sister's voice, tight with barely controlled rage, filled my quiet living room. "What in the hell did you think you were doing? Do you have any idea of the damage you've caused? Victor is devastated. His reputation, our reputation. You had no right, Arthur. This is precisely why we don't include you in things. You've always been jealous of what we have. You've always tried to ruin things for me. Don't call us. Don't try to reach out. You're done." The message ended with an abrupt click. I didn't cry. Instead, a strange, hollow laugh escaped my lips, a broken sound that echoed in my empty house. Jealous? Jealous of their cold, status-obsessed life? Of a marriage that I now knew for a fact was a complete and utter sham? The doorbell chimed an hour later. I opened it, fully expecting to see Rebecca on my doorstep, primed for round 2 of the confrontation. Instead, I found Robert, my 20-year-old nephew, his eyes looking red and puffy. "Uncle Artie," he said, his voice small and uncertain. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, taken aback. Robert hadn't visited me by himself since he was a little boy. Victor had always made sure of that, conveniently scheduling conflicting activities for him whenever I extended an invitation. He sat down at my small kitchen table, declining my offer of a drink, just twisting his hands nervously in his lap. "Dad and Mom are having a huge fight," he said at last. "Mom's talking about divorce. Elias Calloway's wife showed up at the house. It's absolute chaos." I just nodded, not knowing what to say. "Is it true?" Robert asked, looking up at me. "About Dad and Mrs. Calloway?" I let out a long sigh. "I only saw one text message, Robert. But yes, I believe it Island." He nodded, his gaze dropping back to his hands. "I'm not surprised. Dad's always been like that. He always has to have everything. The best house, the best car, the most successful husband. Even when he already has those things, he still seems to want more." In that moment, looking at my nephew's face so much like Rebecca's, but with a gentleness that she had lost long ago, I was struck by how much I had missed by being systematically excluded from their lives. I barely knew this young man. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I never intended to cause this kind of catastrophic upheaval. Robert looked up again, his eyes surprisingly clear. "Don't be. Maybe it was something that needed to happen. Maybe we all needed to finally see the truth." He left a short while later, promising to call me the next day. As I closed the door behind him, I was filled with a strange and conflicting mixture of guilt and liberation. I had certainly unleashed a painful truth, but maybe, just maybe, in doing so, I had finally broken myself free from decades of subtle cruelty and painful exclusion. I slept fitfully that night, my dreams a chaotic jumble of elegant name cards, malicious whispers, and the look of utter betrayal on Elias Calloway's face. By the time morning arrived, I knew with certainty that the news would have already spread through their entire social circle like a contagion. Arthur Harrington, the troublemaker, the outsider who had dared to speak the unspeakable. I should have been terrified of the inevitable fallout. Instead, as I stood by my kitchen counter making my morning coffee, I found myself standing a little taller. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt something entirely unexpected. I felt free. Within 3 days, the whispers had indeed spread through our small city like wildfire. I could feel the stares as I arranged a batch of fresh tulips in the front window of my shop. I overheard the hushed conversations at the grocery store that would abruptly cease the moment I walked down the aisle. Riverside simply wasn't a large enough town to hide from a scandal of this magnitude, especially one involving the prominent Calloway and Harrington families. My phone had been unnervingly silent. There were no more furious calls from Rebecca, not even an angry text message. That deep silence worried me more than her rage ever could. My sister could hold a grudge longer and tighter than anyone I had ever known. "Mr. Harrington?" Jessie called from the front counter, pulling me from my thoughts. "There's someone here to see you." I looked up from my work, half expecting to see Robert again. Instead, I found Elias Calloway himself, standing in my small flower shop, looking as out of place as a prize-winning stallion in a petting zoo. His impeccably tailored beige suit likely cost more than my shop's monthly rent. "Elias," I said, wiping my damp hands on my work apron, "this is unexpected." He glanced around the shop, taking in the buckets of flowers, the modest displays, and the worn but clean countertops. "I've never actually been in here before," he remarked, as if he were surprised to find that such a place existed at all. "What can I do for you?" I asked, making a conscious effort to keep my voice neutral. Elias's perfectly composed face was impossible to read. "You've created quite a situation, Arthur." "I told the truth," I replied. "Victor did this to himself." Elias's lip twitched almost imperceptibly. "Jessica moved out last night. We're separating." I felt a sudden pang of guilt. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" His sharp, intelligent eyes studied me intently. "I'm not entirely sure I believe that." "I never intended to hurt you," I said truthfully. I couldn't let Victor humiliate me like that again." Elias nodded slowly. "Victor has been telling everyone you fabricated the entire story, that you've always been jealous of his and Rebecca's marriage, and that you're mentally unstable." I let out a short, bitter laugh despite myself. "Of course he did. That sounds exactly like him." "Is it true that you have proof?" Elias asked, his voice betraying the slightest hint of vulnerability beneath his steely exterior. I hesitated for a moment. "I saw one text message. I didn't take a picture or save it." "I see." Elias straightened his already perfect posture. "Well, it hardly matters now. Jessica confessed everything eventually." We stood there in an awkward, heavy silence for a moment. "I'm canceling my standing floral order with Harrington Flowers," he said finally. "And I've had a word with the Riverside Garden Club. They'll be using Peterson's for their spring luncheon this year." My stomach plummeted. The Garden Club order was my single biggest contract of the year. "I understand," I said, somehow managing to keep my voice steady. Elias turned to go, but then paused at the door. "You shouldn't have kept it a secret for so long, Arthur." "Not for Victor's sake." After he left, I sank onto the stool behind the counter. Jessie approached me cautiously. Was that Elias Calloway? What did he want? "To cancel his orders," I said, my voice flat. "And apparently to inform me that the garden club is dropping us too." Jessie's face fell. "Because of what happened at the luncheon?" I nodded grimly. "That's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong." I offered him a tired smile. "Life isn't always fair, Jessie." By the end of that week, 4 more of my long-standing business accounts had been canceled. Victor had clearly been very busy. The prevailing narrative around town had taken a decidedly negative turn. I was now poor, unstable Arthur, a man so consumed by jealousy that he was making up vicious lies about his successful sister's wonderful husband. I was restocking a bucket of fresh roses when the little bell over the front door jingled. Robert stood there looking nervous. "Hi, Uncle Artie." "Robert," I said, surprised to see him again so soon. "I wasn't expecting you." "Dad took away my car keys," he explained. "I had to take the bus. He doesn't want me talking to you." "I'm not surprised," I sighed. "Are you sure you should be here then?" Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I needed to tell you something. Dad is telling everyone you're lying, but I know you're not." "How do you know that?" "Because I saw the texts too, months ago. I borrowed his phone to call a friend when mine died, and the messages popped up." He wrung his hands together anxiously. "I didn't know what to do. My mom worships him. She never sees what he's really like." I studied my nephew's face. There was something in his expression I'd never seen before. A profound weariness. A tension settled deep around his eyes. "Robert, how does your father treat you when nobody else is around?" His eyes instantly filled with tears. He has expectations, and I'm never quite meeting them. Too sensitive, too quiet, too ordinary. Not the son he feels he deserves." I felt a hot surge of protective anger rise in my chest. "You are perfect, exactly as you are." Robert blinked back his tears. "I've been thinking about moving out. I saved some money from my summer job, but it's not enough for an apartment yet." I hesitated for only a brief second. "I have a spare room. It's small, but it's yours if you want it." His eyes widened in disbelief. "Really? But what about Mom and Dad? They'll be furious." "Let them be," I said, surprised by my own newfound boldness. "It's time someone in this family stood up to Victor." Robert threw his arms around me in a spontaneous hug that completely caught me off guard. Over his shoulder, through the large front window of the shop, I saw Rebecca's car pull up sharply to the curb outside. "Well," I murmured, "looks like we might get that chance sooner than we expected." Rebecca didn't slam the shop door when she entered. That would have been far too undignified for her. Instead, she closed it with a controlled, deliberate precision that was somehow more intimidating than any overt display of rage. "Robert," she said, her voice deceptively calm, "your father has been looking all over for you." Robert's body tensed beside me. "I'm talking to Uncle Artie. I can see that. It's time to go home now." I placed a protective hand on Robert's shoulder. "He's welcome to stay and talk for as long as he likes, Rebecca." My sister's face tightened. She was still a handsome woman at 60. Her silver hair styled in a way that made her look distinguished rather than old. But in that moment, all I could see was the coldness that had always lurked just beneath her polished exterior. "Haven't you done enough damage, Arthur? First, you humiliate my husband with your disgusting lies." "They weren't lies," Robert interrupted, his voice shaking but determined. "Dad's been seeing Mrs. Calloway for months. I saw the messages too." Rebecca's face went completely slack with shock. She had clearly expected her son to fall in line and side with them, as he always had. "Robert, you don't understand these things." "I understand perfectly," he said. "Dad's been awful to Uncle Artie for years, and you've just let it happen, and he's been awful to me too." "That's ridiculous," Rebecca snapped. "Your father has given you everything you could ever want." "Everything except acceptance," Robert said quietly, "or kindness." Something flickered in Rebecca's eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that was quickly extinguished by a fresh wave of anger. "This is your doing," she said, pointing a finger at me. "You've poisoned my son against us." "No, Rebecca," I replied, feeling strangely calm. "Victor did that all on his own." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a threatening hiss. "The garden club account was just the beginning, Arthur. Victor has friends in this town. Important friends. By the time he's finished, you won't have a business left." The threat should have terrified me. A month ago, it would have sent me into a spiral of panic. But standing there with Robert at my side, I felt something unfamiliar stirring inside me. Strength, perhaps? Or maybe it was simply the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from decades of allowing myself to be bullied into silence. "Is that who you've become, Rebecca?" I asked softly. "A woman who helps her husband destroy her own brother's livelihood because he exposed an ugly truth?" Something moved across her face then. Maybe it was regret, or maybe shame, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Robert, let's go," she repeated, reaching for his arm. Robert stepped back out of her reach. "No, I'm going to stay with Uncle Artie for a while." "Don't be ridiculous. What about your university classes?" "I can commute," he said firmly. "I need some space from you and Dad." Rebecca's face darkened. "If you don't come home right now, your tuition stops, your allowance stops, everything stops." I felt Robert tremble beside me, but his voice remained steady when he answered, "Then I'll get a job. I'll take out student loans, like normal people do." Rebecca stared at him, clearly stunned by this unexpected resistance. Then she turned her cold gaze back to me. "Congratulations, Arthur. You've finally succeeded in turning my family against me. I hope you're satisfied." She turned on her heel and walked out, the little bell above the door jingling with an incongruously cheerful sound. That night, Robert slept in my spare room while I sat at my kitchen table, tallying the month's books. The numbers were grim. With the garden club account gone and the other cancellations, I was looking at a significant shortfall. If Victor succeeded in turning more clients against me, the shop might not survive until summer. I was still staring blankly at the depressing figures when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Elias Calloway. Can we meet tomorrow? 10:00 a.m. at Riverside Park. I have a proposition." I showed up at the park the next morning, my curiosity outweighing my weariness. Elias was already there, sitting on a bench overlooking the duck pond. He looked less polished and more human than I'd ever seen him. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down beside him. "What's this about, Elias?" He gazed out at the water for a long moment. "I've left Jessica for good. The divorce papers are being drawn up." "I'm sorry," I said, and this time I truly meant it. He shook his head. "Don't be. It was long overdue. I've been complicit in my own unhappiness for far too long." He turned to look at me. "Much like you, I suspect." I said nothing, surprised by his insight. "The annual Municipal Gardens fundraiser is next month," he continued. "I'm chairing the committee again." "Congratulations," I said cautiously. "I want Harrington Flowers to provide all the arrangements." He handed me a thick folder. 20 centerpieces, 6 large-scale installations. The full contract is inside. I blinked, completely shocked. The Municipal Gardens event was the biggest social affair of the spring season. The floral contract alone was worth a small fortune. "But why?" I managed to ask. Elias's lips curved into a smile that had a distinct hint of steel in it. "Victor has always cared more about appearances than reality. He thinks he holds power over me because of what happened. I think it's time we show him which of us actually has influence in this town." I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the details. This contract could single-handedly save my business. What do you say, Arthur? Partners in a little social recalibration? I found myself returning his smile. I'd be delighted, Elias. As I walked back to my shop, the spring sunshine suddenly felt warmer and brighter. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy. Victor wouldn't back down without a fight. But for the first time in years, I wasn't facing it alone. And perhaps even more importantly, I was finally finding the strength to stand up for myself. The morning of the Municipal Gardens fundraiser dawned clear and bright. I had been up since 4:00 a.m., my hands surprisingly steady as I arranged cascades of white peonies, deep blue hydrangeas, and trailing ivy into elegant crystal vases. Robert worked diligently beside me, his natural artistic eye a welcome surprise. In the 3 weeks he'd been living with me, we'd discovered a host of shared interests that neither of us had ever known about. "These look amazing, Uncle Artie," he said, stepping back to admire our handiwork. The shop itself had been transforming over the past few weeks. Robert had suggested we add a small coffee corner, serving fresh pastries from the local bakery. He completely redesigned our social media presence, posting beautiful, professional-looking photos of our arrangements every day. A younger crowd in town had started to drift in, drawn by Robert's modern aesthetic, combined with my traditional craftsmanship. Business was slowly but surely picking up again, though Victor's campaign of whispers still cast a long shadow. Just last week, I discovered he'd been spreading a rumor that I used old, half-dead flowers and deliberately overcharged my clients. Robert had immediately responded by posting a series of behind-the-scenes videos showing our meticulous morning flower selection process at the wholesale market. "Elias called again," Robert said, carefully placing a finished centerpiece into our delivery van. "He wanted to make sure everything is perfect." "It will be," I assured him, though my stomach was a bundle of knots. This event was a make-or-break moment. It would either resurrect my reputation in Riverside or sink it for good. Jesse appeared at the back door of the workroom. "There's someone here to see you, Mr. Harrington." I turned to find Martin Lewis standing awkwardly by the entrance. Martin had been one of the men at Victor's table during the infamous luncheon, his laughter one of the most cutting when I'd first seen my name card. "Martin," I said, a wave of weariness washing over me. "How can I help you?" He nervously twisted the strap of his expensive briefcase. "I wanted to apologize, Arthur. I shouldn't have laughed that day." I studied his face, searching for any hint of insincerity but finding none. "Why the change of heart?" He hesitated. "Victor has been saying some terrible things about you, but then I saw your work for the Callaway Foundation dinner last week. It was exquisite, and I started to wonder what else he might have been wrong about." I felt a small, vindicating warmth spread through my chest. "Thank you, Martin. I'd like to order arrangements for my son's graduation party next month," he continued. "If you're not too busy, that island." By early afternoon, all 20 centerpieces and 6 massive installations had been delivered and set up at the Riverside Country Club. The ballroom looked magical. My vision of an English garden in full spring bloom had been brought to life with cascading flowers and delicate greenery. Elias moved through the space with an air of quiet authority, nodding his approval. "It's perfect, Arthur," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Even better than I had hoped." Guests would begin arriving in an hour. I was gathering my tools to leave when Elias touched my arm. "You're staying, of course." I blinked in surprise. I wasn't invited. "You are now," he said firmly, handing me an embossed name card. "Table 1. My table." I stared down at the card. Arthur Harrington, written in the same elegant script that had once marked me as an outcast. "I can't," I stammered. "I don't have anything to wear." "I took the liberty," Elias interrupted, gesturing to a garment bag hanging in the office. "I hope you don't mind." The boutique owner assured me it would fit. Inside was a simple but elegant navy blazer and trousers that looked exactly like something I would have chosen for myself if I had Elias's budget. Robert's eyes widened when he saw it. "Uncle Artie, you have to stay. It will show everyone that Elias supports you." An hour later, I stood nervously at the ballroom entrance as Riverside's elite filtered in. Some nodded politely in my direction. Others pointedly pretended not to see me at all. I was searching the crowd for Elias when I heard a familiar voice right behind me. "Arthur." I turned to find Rebecca standing there, looking distinctly uncomfortable in her evening gown. We hadn't spoken a single word since our confrontation in my shop. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I did the flowers," I said simply, "and Elias invited me to stay." Her eyes narrowed. "Victor won't like that." "I don't particularly care what Victor likes anymore, Rebecca." She shifted uneasily on her feet. "Robert hasn't been answering my calls. He's been busy, working at the shop, taking his classes, living his life." "Is he happy?" she asked, her voice betraying the first genuine emotion I had heard from her in years. "Yes," I said honestly. "I think he island." Something in her face softened for a moment. "I found something in Mom's old study when we were clearing it out for the estate sale." She handed me a yellowed, brittle envelope. Inside was a document I had never seen before. A deed to a small parcel of undeveloped land on the edge of town. "It was meant for you," Rebecca said. "Mom left us each a piece of property. Victor convinced me not to tell you about yours." I stared at her, completely speechless. "It's not worth a great deal," she continued, "but it's yours. It always was." Before I could find my voice to respond, Victor appeared at her side, his face tightening into a mask of fury when he saw me. "What is he doing here?" "He was invited," Rebecca replied, a new sharp edge to her voice. "By Elias?" "Well, that's just perfect," Victor hissed. "First you steal my son, now you're trying to steal my social standing too?" I looked at this man who had made it his mission to torment me for so many years, and I felt nothing but a profound sense of pity. "I didn't steal anything, Victor. You drove Robert away with your cruelty. And as for your social standing, you damaged that all on your own." "Ladies and gentlemen," Elias's voice boomed over the microphone from the stage, "if you'll all please take your seats, dinner is about to be served." I turned away from Victor and Rebecca, the old deed still clutched in my hand, and walked toward table 1, where Elias and Robert were waiting for me. Behind me, I heard Rebecca say quietly to her husband, "We need to talk, Victor, about a lot of things." 1 year later, I stood on the sidewalk in front of my newly renovated storefront, the warm spring sunshine on my face, as Robert adjusted the brand new sign. It now read, "Harrington, Nephew, Flowers and Gathering Space." The small plot of land Rebecca had returned to me, my mother's forgotten gift, had been sold to a developer for a surprisingly generous sum. It was enough to not only save my shop, but to expand into the vacant storefront next door. "It looks perfect," Robert said, stepping back to admire our work. The little bell over the door jingled as Jesse emerged with a tray of empty coffee cups. "The men from the book club are asking if they can set up in the corner nook today instead of their usual table." "Of course," I nodded. Whatever makes them comfortable. The shop had evolved over the past year, becoming something much more than just a place to buy flowers. The little coffee corner Robert had suggested had expanded into a full-fledged gathering space with comfortable chairs and small tables where various community groups now met throughout the week. Garden clubs, book clubs, a support group for men starting new businesses. They all found a welcoming home in our warm, flower-filled space. "Uncle Artie," Robert called from inside, "the invitation you've been waiting for is here." My heart did a little skip as I took the familiar cream-colored envelope from his hands. The Riverside Gentleman's Luncheon, once again. I'd heard through the grapevine that they had new leadership this year. "Are you going to go?" Robert asked. I thought about it for a moment. "Yes," I decided with a smile. "I think I will." The past year had been one of astonishing transformations. Elias and I had become unlikely friends. Our weekly lunches, a source of mutual support and unexpected laughter. Rebecca had filed for divorce from Victor after discovering even more of his indiscretions, and she was slowly, cautiously, attempting to rebuild a relationship with both me and her son. Victor had moved to a large city a few states away, where his particular brand of social manipulation didn't have the same impact in a vast sea of strangers. The last I'd heard, he was dating a divorced stockbroker and spinning elaborate tales of his dramatic escape from the suffocating oppression of small-town life. And me? I had found my voice, and I had found my place. Not as Rebecca Harrington's inconvenient brother, but as Arthur Harrington, business owner, community builder, and, to my constant surprise, a mentor to several young men in town who sought out my advice on how to stand their ground. The day of the luncheon arrived with perfect spring weather. I wore a simple green blazer that complemented my silver hair, which I now wore in a stylish cut instead of the severe, practical style I'd favored for years. Elias met me outside the hotel. "Ready?" he asked with a knowing smile. "As I'll ever be," I replied. The ballroom was filled with familiar faces, but the atmosphere felt entirely different, less exclusive and stuffy, more genuine and relaxed. Martin Lewis waved me over to his table, where several men greeted me warmly. "Arthur, we were just discussing the summer garden tour," Martin said. "We'd love to include your courtyard garden this year if you're willing." I was about to answer when I noticed the name card at my place setting. This time, it simply read, Arthur Harrington, in the same elegant script as everyone else's. I smiled, running my finger over the embossed letters. "I'd be honored to participate, Martin." After the meal, a man I didn't recognize approached me. David Miller, the new head of the Riverside Gentlemen's Auxiliary. "Mr. Harrington," he said warmly, "I've heard so much about you. Elias tells me you've transformed your shop into something of a community hub." I nodded, warmed by the recognition. "We try to provide a welcoming space for anyone who needs it." "That's exactly the kind of initiative our group wants to support," he continued. "We're starting a grant program for men-owned businesses that give back to the community. I'd love to discuss how we might be able to help you expand your gathering space concept." Later, as Elias and I shared a quiet moment on the hotel terrace, I found myself shaking my head in wonder. "Something amusing?" he asked. "Life," I replied. A year ago, I was the inconvenient one, the man nobody wanted at these events. "And now," Elias finished for me, "and now you're becoming a force in this town, on your own terms." I thought about Robert, who had absolutely blossomed while working at the shop and finishing his degree. I thought about the small but growing community that gathered daily in our space, about the men who sought me out for advice or simply for a listening ear. I spent so many years trying to be accepted by people who never truly valued me, I said softly. I never realized that by simply being myself, I might create something far more meaningful than social acceptance. Elias raised his champagne glass. "To the inconvenient ones," he said with a small, genuine smile, "may we continue to disrupt the comfortable and comfort the disrupted." I clinked my glass against his. "To finding our own place in the world, however late in life it comes." That evening, I returned to my shop, to my haven, and found Robert hosting an impromptu gathering of young local entrepreneurs. Their laughter filled the space, mingling with the rich scent of flowers and fresh coffee. "Uncle Artie," he called, waving me over. "How was the luncheon?" "Different," I said with a genuine smile. "Better." As I moved through my shop, greeting each person by name, I thought about that first invitation from a year ago. The one that had seemed like a golden ticket, a chance to finally belong, but had actually been just a cruel, calculated joke. It had turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. The name card that had once been intended to cause me such deep pain, the inconvenient one, had become a badge of honor. Being inconvenient to those who wanted to maintain their comfortable, exclusionary status quo was sometimes exactly what was needed. I had spent 55 years living in the long shadow of my sister's social standing, desperately seeking approval from people who would never truly see me. Now, at 56, I had finally stepped into the light. Not their light, but my own, and it was glorious. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.